Hey everyone, Aleki here. Thank you for rejoining me back on Europa. As promised last time, in this episode we're gonna tackle 3 automation projects, which should make life a little easier around the base. For that, we need to first build a computer that we're gonna be using to write IC10 code, and have at least one IC10 chip with its attendant housing. So let's get those things made. First off, the computer. And for that, I'm gonna need to grab some more copper from our trusty metal locker and get that printed. Next up, we're gonna need an IC editor motherboard, which enables the computer to edit IC10 code. And of course, the IC10 chip itself, because that code does need somewhere to run. For that, we need the chip, and we will need an IC10 housing. Now that I've got all that, let's get them set up. This solar panel is no longer in use, so I think I'm gonna get rid of it and use the space it's taking up to set up the computer. So, get that disassembled and put away its parts. So, first up, the computer. It does come in a few different variants, and I think I like this wall-mounted one. I think it'll go nicely here on the window. Once it's fully built, using a screwdriver, the window will no longer be visible through the screen. Over on this right side, it has a motherboard port, and that's where the IC editor motherboard goes in. Click up to close it. Now, we need to wire it. It has a data and a power port on the bottom, so we'll get those connected. And I do need to plan a spot where I'm going to connect the IC10 chip itself. Over on this side, I do have the power going down to the deep miner and to the grow lamp, so I'm gonna tap into that cable for power. Okay, now the computer is powered, so let's add the IC10 housing. This has 2 variants, one with separate power and data, and one with power and data on the same side. I like this one for our current needs, so let's set that up and plug in the IC10 chip. Of course, right now it has no code, so it will not do anything just yet. But let's take a look at the first project that I want to tackle. This grow light, I've been turning it on and off by hand, and I keep forgetting to do that with regular timing, so I want to automate it. Unfortunately, as far as I know, there is no clock system that the IC10 coding can use. So I'm gonna approximate the day cycle using a solar sensor kit. So for that, I need a kit sensors, which is made on the electronics printer. Let's get one of those made. And also, I'm going to want to track the minimum and maximum elevation of the sun just to fine-tune knowing what the range is. Of course, that changes throughout the year, but I'm going to want to use 2 displays, which are made with the console's kit, to show the minimum and maximum elevation of the sun that we've discovered so far. This can go here on the wall above the greenhouse. I think 2 small LED displays will do. Now, let's go outside and set up that daylight sensor. Since I'm only interested in the vertical position of the sun, the horizontal orientation doesn't matter for this purpose. So I'll put it right here where the cable is nearby. Also make sure that I have my labeler with me because I'm going to be using that to set up names for some of these devices. So let's name the 2 LED displays. So this will be LED main sun and LED max sun. Then the IC housing itself, I'm gonna name it IC housing greenhouse. Now I want to connect the device pins on my IC housing to the 3 devices that we'll be using by direct reference, and then the grow light, I'll be using it by hash. So let's cycle this until we find the daylight sensor on D0, and then I want LED min solar. There we go. LED main sun on D1, and LED max sun will be on D2. Now I can select the IC housing and edit the code. One very useful thing while writing code is this pause button up here, which will pause the game time while you're writing code. Of course, I'm not going to bore you by keeping you here watching me slowly type code, so let's use the magic of editing to skip to the program being done. I did forget one thing, and that is to connect the data cable for the grow light. So of course the AC10 cannot control it yet. So I'm going to add that. And now the code works. The AC10 turned the light on. I do have it set to a threshold of 180, which is essentially permanently lit. But looking at our minimum and maximum, we have a minimum of 78.5 known so far. Of course, as it passes through the next day, we might get an updated value there. And 135. I'll put the diagram on screen here, but with a solar sensor placed facing upwards, the vertical will be 0 when the sun is straight up in the sky, and 180 when it is completely down below the planet. Of course, because of orbits, it doesn't, and this changes with seasons, the sun is not typically going to reach 0 or 180. But it looks like if I set it maybe to about, let's say 100 degrees as our nighttime, then we should get some nighttime and some daytime. As I get better mins and max on the screens, I'll be able to refine it. So over here on line 3, I'm going to set the angle where I consider nighttime to start, and I want the light to turn off. My computer was set to push this code to filtration, not to icy house and greenhouse. So now exporting it, it is properly turning the light off. And once a full day passes without restarting the script, we're going to see some realistic min and max values here. Every time I push a new version of the script, it restarts, so the minimum and maximum gets reset. Yeah, my waste tank is almost full, so let's empty that out and have a quick shower. It will be pitch black here. Let's take a quick detour and add a regular light in the shower. I think one of these will look good. I don't remember where the cables were, but I'm gonna take my best guess, since I do know that they connect these vents. Okay, we have a shower light. Now I can take off the suit and have that quick shower. I can turn off the light in the shower. Before we jump into the next automation project, I'm noticing another issue, and that is the battery has been draining. Even with the added turbines, we're not producing enough to sustain this usage. So for one, I'm going to turn off the computer. That's 200 watts of usage, and I'm going to turn off these two consoles. The IC10 is still going to track the minimum and maximum while they're off, because those use 50 watts each, so I just shaved 300 watts of usage off of my my base's drainage. Now, as a backup to my turbines, I'm gonna make a solid power generator. That is the Kid Solid generator. It's made with just iron and copper, so if you need a source of power and have a bunch of coal, it's something you can make early on. And to connect that generator, I'm also going to want another piece of super heavy cable to splice into the the generator side power network. Okay, let's go outside and set that up and get the battery charged a little bit more. This is all temporary, so I'm going to stick it right here by the battery and splice into its source cable with the generator's power output. Turn that on, and I'm going to grab from the locker some of the coal that I have. I think about 10 pieces of coal should be good to charge the battery about halfway. So that is going to give us the boost we need for the moment. Back inside, and let's get started on the next project. For this one, I want to automate the weather station, particularly seeing whether that light is green or yellow. is something that I might miss at times. So I'd like to have some nice light indicators and maybe even a klaxon to let me know when it's time to get ready for an impending storm. Since I want to keep my code separate, I'm gonna need another IC10 housing and another IC10 chip. So I'll start with making those, and then I'll make some of the devices used to alert me. In the meantime, I'm curious, do you like using IC10 programming in your own playthroughs? Or do you go with the logic chips? Do you just avoid this kind of automation altogether? Let me know. And let me know if you would find a Stationeers for Beginners tutorial on writing IC10 code, at least the basics of it, if you'd find that useful. And if so, then I will consider making one. Oh, and don't need 2 chips. Okay, I do need an IC10 housing here. As far as alerting, I think on the outside of the base I'm gonna put a speaker and a flashing light as well. Hopefully those will be noticeable from some distance. And on the inside, I'm gonna set up a essentially slider display. The diode slider, I believe it's called, which is part of the lights kit. So let's set up some of these things. The sliding diode, I want to put it over here. Oh, it's called diode slide. So we will wire that in here. And this will show progress until the beginning of the next storm. Now the IC10 housing, I'm gonna put it over here, not too far from the weather station. This makes it so that if I split the data networks later on, then I'm not gonna... If I split the data networks later on, it's gonna be easy to keep all the things that work together connected. Oh, right, I forgot that I should not place these IC10 housings on glass, because then I cannot stick the chip in them. Actually, here, let me show you. So, I have the chip. I cannot click it there. The knobs can be used, but cannot insert the IC10 chip. I'm gonna put it on this side. If you put it on the back side of the glass panel, then it works okay. Then the flashing light, I'm gonna put it up here. I don't have enough cable to put it all the way at the top, so hopefully this is good enough. And then the klaxon can go here on the wall to tap into the same wire. I'm a little bit low on regular wiring, so I'll have to make more of that. You had exactly as much cable as needed to connect all of these. Now, with a screwdriver, I'm gonna set the devices on the pins. On D0, I want to get to the weather station. Weather station on D0. On D1, I'm gonna set the LED slider, diode slide, it's called. On D2, I'm gonna set the flashing light. And on D3, I'm gonna set the klaxon. And turn that on. Of course, there's no code running on it just yet. And maybe it's a good idea to also name all these devices something custom. So we'll say flashing light weather, or maybe, since these are alphabetic on the pin settings, weather flashing light, weather klaxon speaker, and going inside, we're also gonna rename the diode. And the diode is gonna be weather diode slide. Now, changing their names should not break the association with the IC10 pins. No, that's not a problem. Now, on to writing the code. And yeah, that little piece of 10 coal has given the battery the boost it needs to let the base run for a while. So, on to writing code. And the code is done. So I waited until the next storm is approaching, so I can show it in action. For the diode slide, we have it turning gradually red as the storm is approaching. So it'll stay off when there's no storm active or incoming, and then turn on and be white with a progressing red bar as the storm is approaching. Outside we have the klaxon, which is playing a storm incoming sound, which by default does not auto-repeat, but I use the code to repeat it periodically. So every roughly about 25 seconds, it's gonna say storm incoming.
Storm incoming.
Just like that. Unfortunately, even at 100% volume, it's not as loud as I had hoped for. And we have the flashing light up here. I had hoped that these would be visible further away in a storm, but unfortunately they are not. Now, let's skip ahead to the storm actually arriving and take a look at what happens then. The storm hits, so the diode slide turns completely white. Unfortunately, I have not been able to figure out a way to calculate time progress through the storm. So if you know a way to get the value of how much longer the storm is gonna last, let me know, because I would love to have a progression showing me when the storm is ending. Outside, the klaxon changes to an alarm sound, but in order to keep that from getting too grating, I made it so that it plays for 5 seconds, which is about 3 pulses, and then pauses for about 20 seconds to give our ears a break. And of course, the flashing light stays on. Like I said, sadly, the range that the light is visible in a storm and the distance you can hear the klaxon is not nearly as high as I had hoped. And there we have it, the 3 pulses of the klaxon, followed by some needed silence. Now, before we move on to the next project, I'm gonna upgrade the hydraulic pipe bender. As part of that next project, I'm gonna want to use a turbo pump, and those require an upgraded pipe bender. I'm also gonna take advantage of the storm and fill up the batteries in my tools. So let's make that printer mod. And when the pipe bender one, so I do need more steel. Unfortunately, I'm down to the last bar, so hopefully we have enough materials to get through this episode. If so, I'll do some mining off-screen before the next one. While that gets printed, I'm gonna take care of eating and drinking. Wouldn't need a computer for now, so may as well save some power. Let's see what other tools need a battery top-up. This ore detector could use some. Let's put the large battery in the APC. And what other tools do we have? The hand drill. Yep, that badly needs some charge. And the angle grinder. And the pipe bender upgrade is ready. So using the screwdriver, I'm going to install it onto the printer. Now onto the next project. I want to capture the output of the furnace and automate emptying it. So I want, when I choose to empty the furnace, if the output is hot, we store it away in a tank. And if it's not hot, then we just pump it out into the atmosphere. So for that, we're going to need some hydraulic pipe bender stuff. Mainly, we're going to need a volume pump. And I want to use the turbo one, which is why I made the upgrade to the printer. For that, I'm going to need to grab the electrum out of the electronics printer. And get that done. Also, I'm going to need more cables. So I'm going to get that set up on the printer along with the IC10 chip, which also needs the electrum, so we'll hold off on that. Let's see, the housing, that just requires solder. And we do have some solder here. Okay, we'll get the housing built. Now that I finished with the turbo pump, I can get my electrum back out of this printer. The other thing that I'm going to need is an insulated tank. The way that tanks work has changed since I set up the initial gas capture system. So it used to be that tanks were their own separate device with its own internal volume. More recently, the tanks are just part of the pipe network. So the way the inline tanks are not a separate device with a separate volume, the same now, the tanks just add their volume to the pipe network. However, the existing tanks are not automatically migrated, so you do have to disassemble them and reassemble them. But because there's gases in that one, I want to first move the gases to a new tank and then disassemble the old one. And I'm not worried about the duplicates. Sooner or later, I'm going to be using so many insulated tanks that I'm going to need a lot more than one extra. Okay, the housing is done. So let's make the IC10 chip. And we are going to need a lot of insulated piping as well. The chip is done. And I am out of cable. So let's make a lot of cable coils. Meanwhile, I'm going to leave some of the things that I don't need in the locker to have room for the stuff that I actually need. I made 50 cables and 40 insulated pipes. I'm not sure how many exactly I'm gonna need, but I think I'm also gonna want a few steel frames. So I'm gonna make a few of those and see what leftovers in terms of steel frames and steel sheets we have. It does not look like we have any in here. There might be some outside, but I'll just make a bunch just in case. I made 10 frames and 10 sheets, so let's go outside and start setting things up. Since I'm planning for this industrial hall here, I want to use the ceiling to attach my tanks. That way I'll be making most use of the floor space and the vertical space available. So let's build another piece of future ceiling over here and get those welded ones as well. Now I'm going to take the new tank and set it up upside down onto the ceiling. As you can see, the positioning is very, very forgiving. Now, over here we have the output pipe of the furnace, which right now we have it going to this unused pump and to the vent. So instead, I'm going to take out this volume pump and upgrade it to that turbo volume pump that I made. So over here, it is so hard to see this during daylight. Okay, that should be in the correct orientation, I think. Let's build it and see. Okay, so we'll want to go towards the right, and I'm gonna put this at max volume. In terms of its power connection, it uses the same bottom connection when oriented like that. So all's good on that front. Yeah, let's get the piping done for it. This side of the output pipe is gonna head up to the tank where we're gonna store the furnace gas outputs. And since I do want to move the gases that are currently in this furnace and the old system in general, let's see, what do we have in there? Yeah, we got 5 megapascals of white hot gas mix in here. So we're gonna take that, and I do want it to come in before the pump, so I can use this pump to suck out the gases into the new tank. So I am gonna want to actually connect it on the input side of the pump. This is all temporary, so I'm okay with it being quite janky looking. And I do want to see what the temperature is in the tank right now. 680, that is okay. I don't mind mixing that 680 with the other gases that I've saved up. I always forget to use these somewhat newer 3 and 5 pipes. Let's replace that just so I work on forming the habit. There we go. Straight 3. And over here, a straight 3 pipe. Okay. Now, let's first take a look at the volumes. So, this old tank, we see a capacity of 6,000 liters. We look at the pipe network, we see a 340 liter volume. So it is a separate volume compared to the pipe. The new tank simply displays pipe network capacity 6,150 liters. If we look at the pipe, it's the same thing, same pipe network, same capacity. So it is simplified. One note, if you have used tanks further back, this data port that used to give you all kinds of information about the tank contents no longer exists on the new ones, because it being part of the network, you would just want to use a pipe analyzer to see the contents rather than being able to read it from the tank itself. But now we can get this pump going, and everything that's in here. Does not seem to be on. It should have power. Oh, I was wrong about the powering there. The power connection for the turbo pump is on top, and the data is on the bottom. And now it's running. So if we check the contents, things are being emptied pretty fast into the other network. While that happens, let's set up the IC10 housing and chip. As I said earlier, I do like to keep things that work together pretty close to each other. So let's get this IC10 housing right here by the furnace and the pump. And I am again going to use the version with a single data and power port. And get that connected. Now the chip goes in. And we can turn the housing on because there is no code right now running to cause any issues. With the labeler, I'm going to label everything around the furnace because I did not label any of it earlier. So we have furnace IC housing, furnace active vent, furnace output turbo volume pump, I may as well rename these as well. So furnace chute outlet, furnace chute inlet, and then we have furnace housing active vent. And then, let's see, I don't remember which one was pressure. Okay, so this is pressure. Furnace pressure console monitor. Furnace temperature console monitor. Yeah, I think the pumping may be done. Not quite, there's a tiny bit left. I'm gonna save power and just turn off the pump. We can just throw those gases out into the atmosphere. Then we have here furnace housing pressure console, furnace housing temperature console. And I forgot. Oh, that we already named, right? Furnace housing active vent. So all that is renamed, and our gas is removed. So now we can take the old network and the connection between them apart. Let's start right here with this unnecessary connection. Yes, we're gonna go up and then remove the ones down this way. And goodbye, old style insulated tank. Of course, when you remove a tank like that, and the gases have nowhere to be pushed into a pipe network or something, they get released in the atmosphere. And I'm realizing that I forgot two things I still need for this project. And that is a switch that I'm going to use to let the system know when I want the furnace to be emptied. And a pipe analyzer, which I'm going to use to detect the properties within the pipe, since we can no longer connect to the tank. So we're going to do a pipe analyzer. I do need a little bit of that electrum. And a logic switch. Okay, there's the switch. And there is the pipe analyzer. The battery is draining pretty quickly with all these electronics that we're adding. So I think next episode we're going to be building even more power generation. But for the moment, let's shove a little bit more coal in there. I'm only going to do 5 this time. Just to keep things going. Okay, so the pipe analyzer, I want it on this side of the pipe where the tank is. I'll see if I put that right side up. Since nothing displays on the screen, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so we have the pipe analyzer, and we do need to give that a name. So that's gonna be gas mix pipe analyzer. And the logic switch, I'm not sure which is gonna work best, but I'm gonna try this lever first. The big question for me is whether I'm gonna be able to reset the switch position via its data properties, or if we'll need to use a button or something else instead. I'm not sure on that, but we will find out. That is connected as well, and it needs a name. That is furnace emptying lever. Now we can set pins on the IC10 housing for the things that we're going to need to control. So for one, D0 should be the furnace itself, because we do not want to know if there's anything in the furnace. D1 is going to be the gas mix pipe analyzer. Then D2 is going to be the furnace emptying lever, because we do need to detect if that lever has been pulled. D3 is going to be the furnace turbo pump. I forget what I called that one. Furnace output turbo volume pump, and I did misspell that. Output. Let's call it furnace empty, so it matches the name of the switch. Furnace empty thermal volume pump. And that is on D3. And then this furnace active vent is going to be on D4, because that's what we'll use to empty it if the temperature inside is too low, or if the pressure in the output gases tank is already too high, because we don't want to burst that the tank by pushing too much pressure to it. And with all that in place, we can start writing the code. But before I commit to writing it based on the setup, I want to make sure that the lever can actually be reset programmatically. And as you can see, yes it can. And the script is done, so let's see it in action. I have a few things configured for it. Namely that the minimum temperature that I want to keep in the tank is about 675 degrees Celsius. So if we're emptying the furnace when it is colder than that, it should go out the vent into the atmosphere. If it's warmer, we should put it in the tank. However, I also don't want to put more than 35 megapascals of pressure in the tank, so the script also checks for that. And because I don't want to be pumping out millipascals of gas, I set it so that we consider the furnace empty when it is below 20 kilopascals. That's empty enough. We still have a little bit of leftover hot gas. It's hot enough that it should go in the tank, and the pressure is above what we consider the empty. So now when I pull this lever, it should get pumped into the tank, and it does. When the pressure drops below 20, it stops and the lever resets to off. Now, I'm going to pull in a little bit of cold gas, so we can see what happens when the furnace is cold. The vent is going to fight me because the script keeps trying to turn it off, since the lever is in the off position. The script is controlling this vent, but I can still use it to get some cold air in the furnace. Now, it is warming up because the enclosure itself is equalizing, so let's empty it real quick. And because the furnace is cold, it's venting it out to the atmosphere instead of the tank. Thank you for joining me for these 3 automation projects, which should make life easier around the base. As always, when I'm doing IC10 automation, the scripts are linked in the description of this video if you're interested in using them or adapting them for your own needs. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. For now, Aleki out.